I think that it's time that we check out the War of the Worlds timeline. And I actually started this one about 2 years ago, but I had a lot of trouble tracking down one of the movies. Had a lot of a hard time finding it, but I finally did and found some other ones. And it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what is connected in this series or franchise, or like what is just throwing those words on a title. But I figured I would just go with my gut. And yeah, in case you want to know as you're watching this timeline, just know it's just a YouTube video. It's not real. No one panic. Don't get all Orson Welles on me. So our timeline kicks off back in 1953 with War of the Worlds, the first film version of the classic H.G. Wells tale. It starts by telling us that the inhabitants of the planet Mars scoped out a bunch of planets and decided that ours was the most suitable for takeover and habitation. One night, everyone sees a fireball come from the sky, and a movie theater is playing Samson and Delilah, and it's held over, so it's somewhat later in release, and that movie came out in 1950, although films were in theaters longer back then, but we're somewhere around 50. The locals investigate the crash down site, and it's this big rock, and they're surprised that it didn't make a bigger crater.
The ranger said a scientist is coming from Pacific Tech. He'll tell us. Clayton Forrester, ever hear of him?
I have, but only in the not-too-distant future. Next Sunday AD to be exact. After just banging at it for a while, at night it starts to open up, and this long, glowing tube comes out. When some guys approach it, it blasts them, leaving only ash trails in their places. Turns out that there's reports of other meteors landing in other places around the world, and the military gets involved, preparing for the thing to be able to leave its crater. Seems like the other ones around the world are wiping out whole areas, and they travel in packs of 3. And when they're able to leave the crater, there are these flying bat-like things, quite different from the tripods described in the original story. When they try to fight them, the ships are protected by some sort of invisible force field, and their heat rays just disintegrate everything they hit, including people. Doc Forrester and Sylvia have to flee and take refuge and crash in an old farmhouse. One of the tripods comes along though, and this long tentacle thing comes in to scout it out, looking like some kind of space Simon or whatever. Shortly after, they encounter one of the aliens, and his face resembles the front of the probe. They're able to wound it, so it flees, but they keep on sending more and more cylinders down to attack. They're able to use the wounded Martian's blood to figure out how they work a bit, and they even resort to dropping a nuke on them, but they don't have any effect. They try to evacuate cities, causing chaos there, and it seems like there's no hope. But just when it seems like all is lost, the alien ships just start crashing down, and they determine that the Martians have fallen victim to common bacteria that humans have built up a resistance to, and their attack has ended. Now, it's never officially stated what year it is, and all we have to go by is that movie, so let's say it's real time 53. There was a film all the way in 1981 entitled The War of the Worlds, The Next Century, that was a Polish film about alien invasions, but it's not an adaptation of the Wells story and is not connected in any way, and is simply using the title as a springboard for a completely different story. In 1988, there was a TV series called War of the Worlds that ran in syndication that was meant to be a follow-up to the original film. It says the original was in 1953, and that the Martians didn't die, and instead went into suspended animation, and then moves to 1988, where the stored aliens get free and take on human form. It was 2 seasons long, and kind of fun, even though it's mostly aliens posing as humans, as opposed to aliens. The next film version of the tale was all the way in 2005 with the big budget remake War of the Worlds. The movie opens with a voiceover by Easy Reader, and he says that it's the early part of the 21st century, so it's early 2000s. And he says that we're being watched by otherworldly beings. We're in New York, and Maverick is here, and he's a crane operator, and he drives like an asshole, and I guess his ex-wife Eowyn is pissed at him. It's his turn with his kids, Goku, and the little Fanning, because her and the new man are going to visit her parents. and there's news reports of odd events all around the world. Robbie mentions that baseball season is over, so it's late in the year, but no one's wearing winter clothes, so it's probably October or November. Ray's kind of a dick, and they make a big deal about him thinking hummus isn't food, and like, really? Hummus? Like if you're turned off by hummus, a food with a very moderate taste, you're gonna have trouble eating in general. There's a big storm and his neighbor is Holly Flax, and all power is knocked out, including cars. Meanwhile, they've already established that Ray is like the best crane operator that ever craned, but then they have to have a scene where he tells a mechanic how to do his job, and he's like, oh yeah, you're right. And what a Mary Sue, right? Like, I'm sure there's lots of people online complaining about this, right? Everyone finds this big crater and it erupts, destroying nearby buildings, and a massive ship-like thing arises. It starts blasting people with its ray, which disintegrates them, and even though Ray was like standing right in front of it, he manages to be one of the only ones to escape alive. He rounds up the kids and figures out cars with a changed solenoid will operate, and get ready to see this little girl cry. Like a lot. The car that they're in has a Jersey plate, and the registration sticker is the color for 2005, so this could likely be real-time 05, but it's possible to be 04 as well, and they drive off, even though they're right where the ship appears again, and also not wearing their freaking seatbelts. Like, come on, kids! But they're one of the only people that get away again. They narrowly avoid getting crashed into by a plane, and they've recreated this scene with an actual plane at Universal Studios in Hollywood. They find out that there's lots more than one ship, and they're all over the world, but they're protected by some sort of force shield, and they determine that the ships have been here for a long time, buried, and the aliens came down through the lightning. Come on, you're telling me that all the construction in major metropolitan areas and this thing wasn't even that far underground, and none of that ran into this thing or any of them anywhere in the world? Really? They lose their car and end up trying to get into a ferry, but tripods appear and they close the ramp, but he and his kids manage to get on as one of the last people allowed, of course. But it gets destroyed anyway, and it starts grabbing everyone up. But again, Ray and crew are the only ones to get away. And man, is this dude lucky. But then the military is advancing, and Robbie joins up with them, running directly into an area where literally everything is on fire. So that kid's dead. Ray and Rachel take refuge in a man's house, and I guess are the only people that hear him calling them, and it's Howard the Duck's best friend, Phil. Turns out that Harlan is nuts, and there's this red weed that's growing everywhere, and much like the original, they send a long neck probe down there, and again, one comes out to check it out. But here there's more than one. They find out they're watering the weeds with human blood, and Harlan loses it, so Ray kills him, but they end up getting captured. They manage to escape by blowing the ship up from the inside, and they make it to Boston, and they find the military, but then Ray, of course it's Ray that notices and not any other trained military man, but he spots that the shields are down, and they destroy it. Ray then finds his ex's house, and it's perfectly fine, and they're just hanging out there, no worries, and they are reunited. And the grandparents are cameos by Anne Robinson and Gene Barry from the 53 film, and for some inexplicable reason, Robbie is still alive, and he's here too. Yep, he survived, but did you have any doubt, considering that this family is literally untouchable? But then Lucius Fox comes back and tells us the aliens were defeated by the common cold. And with no other info to go by, let's use that registration sticker and say that this is real-time 05. In that same year, there was another take on it, since Wells' original story was in the public domain, and 2005 also had H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds from the Asylum, a mockbuster film. This one has some guy who has a habit for picking up hitchers and his family, and it's their 10th anniversary. They see what looks like a comet, but since he's an astronomer, he gets called to check it out, and his wife and kid head off on the anniversary trip without him. He heads off to the comet's crash site, and it turns out that all electronics are shut down. But this movie adds one other really important detail.
Smells like ass.
A large ship comes out of the crater and starts to attack, and it does have legs, but it's not a tripod, and it has a heat blast that disintegrates people. George then tries to get to his wife and kid in DC, barely avoiding one of the walker things. Along the way, he meets up with a lone soldier, and they pair up for a bit. They run into Johnny Bartlett, and he tells them that DC has been completely wiped out. And along the way, they encounter more of the walkers, which are quite a bit less effective here. But I love that their rays turn people into skeletons. The aliens come out of the ship and attack, and George continues on, encountering a young priest, and then they start traveling together. The aliens try a new trick with a toxic gas, and they hide out in a veterinarian's house and discover a bunch of rabies shots. But they're found by one of the aliens, and Victor is killed, so he has to continue on alone. He meets back up with his soldier friends, but Ace goes mad and shoots Williams, so George has to take him out. Eventually, he makes it to DC, and it's just a wasteland, and there's a bunch of dead aliens all around. And of course, as expected, they have all died as a result of a lack of immunity to human viruses, and George is reunited with his family. Again, no date shown here, so we're going to go ahead with real-time 05. Believe it or not, but there was yet another version in 2005 called H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. But this was from a British company called Pendragon. This one is set at the turn of the century, and an astronomer has noticed some anomalies on Mars, with flames jetting out of the planet. Soon, a falling star shoots across the sky, or at least the green screen, because around 90% of this film appears to be shot that way. It lands and they go to investigate it, and Ogilvy goes to check it out, only to see it open up and what appears to be a man trying to exit it. So they do the obvious thing, hit it with a big stick. Soon it becomes an attraction as people flock to check out the meteor in the pit, and this goes on for like 20 minutes. Finally, though, the top unscrews and opens up, and a bunch of tentacles shoot out, and a Martian emerges. And yes, the FX quality is the same as everything else has been. When they try to make contact with them, an alien ray beam rises up and starts to lay waste to people, trees, everything around. The military gets involved with cannons, and seriously, look at this mustache. Like, did they think anyone would look at this and say, yes, that's a real and convincing stash? The Martian weapons are too strong, though, and eventually they spawn legs and start to walk, causing more destruction as they go. Things get worse and worse for everyone, but it mostly just like is people walking around green screens while these things that are like the worst looking bionicles ever stroll around in the background. Our main character and his brother end up getting into scrapes with aliens, humans, and whatever this thing is supposed to be.
They're feeding us some kind of beast.
The Martians are draining people of blood here, which is hilarious because the 3D render of the woman looks completely different from the live-action counterpart. And finally, our hero is alone on the road, comes face to face with a tripod, and offers himself to it. But it falls down. Of course, as expected, they're all killed by germs. And I want to point out that I watched the director's cut of this film, and it was about 2 hours and 20 minutes long. But what's weird is that it's actually shorter than the regular cut, which was 3 hours long. So I dodged a damn bullet. Now, there's no stated date, but they say it's the turn of the century, and the original story takes place in the 1890s, so that's when this likely is as well. The next one to arrive was 2008, and it's an actual sequel with War of the Worlds 2, The Next Wave, a continuation of the Asylum version. It says it's now 2 years after the events of the first film, so possibly 2007, if that was in 05, and we see new tripods landing in a shantytown and beginning to attack. There's this guy, and he takes a blood sample from a young woman and then injects it back into his leg. George is back, again played by Howell, and he directed this time as well. And I guess sometime in those 2 years, his wife dies. She's not around, and he says his son is all he has left. He goes to the base of what's left of the humans and says that he's detected some signals that the aliens may be creating a wormhole to get to Earth to continue attacks. They've been using some alien tech to retrofit their fighter jets to better combat them, and yeah, they mention that Felicity isn't around anymore, although stopped short of saying what happened. But when George goes home, he's just in time to see a tripod appear and zap his kid into nothingness. He realizes that his boss said that the ships are taking people and not killing them, and hopes to save his son, so he gets himself blasted. He wakes up and he's inside the ship with a bunch of other humans, including Kid, or maybe Play? Like, it's hard to tell without the flat top. Outside, the Martians have set out with a new full-scale attack, so the military gear up their new jets, and inside the ship, people are getting sucked into the walls, which look suspiciously like sheets of plastic, while the fighters end up going through the wormhole and time jumping. George and Pete escape to Earth, and it seems like no one is around, but run into Sissy from the beginning, but it turns out that it's not actually Earth at all. This is the Matrix-like city that they created 2 years ago to store humans that they captured. And it turns out that Sissy has some sort of illness, and they hope to infect the aliens with it, which is why they're injecting her blood. Shackelford dies, and George injects himself and then gets sucked up. They locate Alex and then stick the viral blood directly into one of their communication brains, which destroys all the tripods, and the guys get away on one of the fighter jets. The Martian mothership explodes, and everyone makes it back to Earth, although Alex appears traumatized. George survives the infection, but they get a radio signal that indicates a third wave is on the way. So, with no other indications of dates, we'll go with that 2007. The next one to arrive was in 2012 and is unconnected to anything else and is War of the Worlds, Goliath. The opening sends us back to 1899 and we see the events of the classic story, leaving Earth devastated. The Martians are in these big tripods with a bunch of tentacles, and a family are on the run getting blasted. Little Eric sees his parents killed, but the pod then collapses, a victim of the bacteria. It then jumps 15 years to 1914, and because of the Martian tech, there's been massive advancements. Eric is now 25 years old and a member of a defense squad, and goes to a meeting where we're told 140 million people died in the war. Seems that Roosevelt is president, and Nikola Tesla is here too, and says that Earth and Mars are nearing in orbit once again, and they expect another attack. They introduce a new military unit called the Battle Tripod, and Eric is given control over it with his team, and they name it the Goliath. There's international unease when Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, probably because he sang Take Me Out too loud, but then soon enough, the tripods are back and more deadly than ever. Thankfully, the tanks have their own heat rays now, as they're the only thing that's really effective, and they're able to waste 3 of them, but only after taking some heavy casualties. More Martians touch down all over, and this time they have these Independence Day type saucers, and they've now built up a resistance to Earth bacteria. They find an alien base where they're harvesting humans for food, but manage to destroy it and escape. It all comes down to a final battle in New York with a bunch of casualties, but they finally beat them back. And then a huge ship rises up from the bay and destroys nearly everything, but they're finally able to defeat it by sacrificing their massive warship. Roosevelt then gives a big speech, and they vow to take the war to Mars. 1 year later, there was a curious thing that's related called Jeff Wayne's musical version of the War of the Worlds from 2013. It was a live stage version of a concept double album that the artist released back in 1978. This particular live stage release was called Jeff Wayne's musical version of the War of the Worlds, The New Generation, Alive on Stage. This live version had little appearances from Liam Neeson and others, and used holograph technology to do a big multimedia production. It's not really a part of the timeline though, since it's more of a concert than a film, but it's pretty damn cool. There was another TV run in 2019 with a BBC series that was also an adaptation of the original story, set in the Edwardian era. It was basically a 3-episode miniseries, but here's the weirder thing. That same year, there was another TV show called War of the Worlds that was from Fox. This one ran for 3 seasons, 24 episodes in total, and is again just a version of the original story, but just in modern times. Okay, then in 2021, there was a Tubi original film called War of the Worlds: Annihilation, that as far as I can tell, is not connected to any previous adaptations. It kicks off with a young couple seeing a shooting star crash down, but it's an alien ship, and it lets out a gas and kills them. But then a large number of comets come down, and this Baldwin is here, and I don't even know which one this is. I guess it's not the Shadow, McManus, or Vampire Hunting Dude. So whichever Baldwin that leaves left, that's which one this is. One thing's for sure, I'm pretty sure that this beard is not military regulation. But I admit that I don't know a ton about that stuff, but I'm sure you guys can let me know if I'm right in the comments. The toxic gas spreads and they send in a squad, but they're ambushed by laser fire and tentacles until there's only one left. But then the fog lifts up, and there's a big tank thing that looks less like a Martian tripod and more like Goliath. The one soldier's wife hears him get killed and gives a crying breakdown that's probably a little too good for this lowbrow flick, and she goes AWOL in order to find her son. Miraculously, he's the only student in his whole school to survive. It looks like the main alien ships are these things, which are closer to tripods than the battle tank from earlier. They go on the run and team up with a guy named Tiago, and they take refuge in a jail. The attacks make their way there as well, and they figure out that if they take out the mothership, the entire army will fall. Meanwhile, the aliens themselves are revealed to be humanoid in nature and can even speak English, and they discover that the aliens have been misled into fighting the war by their government. They've tracked the attacks to a planet outside the solar system, so not from Mars, and this weirdly doesn't seem like any connection to the War of the Worlds story, with the sole exception of calling the alien ships tripods. They eventually meet back up with the military, and it's revealed that the aliens used up all of their resources and plan to kill all humans in order to inhabit Earth instead. Tiago sacrifices himself to save Luca, but Ashlaya believes that he was killed too. There's a final standoff, and they're able to hack into the alien signal and reprogram their drones to attack their own ships, bringing them down, which deactivates all the tripods. The Gwen alien reveals that they have the same DNA, and everyone's reunited, and the alien refugees come off their ships. The military orders to fire on them, but Ashlaya convinces them not to, and they make contact, because as you know, the one thing that America is known for is being really welcoming to refugees. We're shown the aliens on their planet, and for some reason they're wearing military garb that's the same as our own there. Down to lapel pills saying US, and it seems like we're taking the fight to them. Now there's no date on this one, so Real-Time 21 is going to be fine. There was another one that's a new setup in 2023 with War of the Worlds: The Attack. It begins with 3 teens on bikes looking for a shooting star that they saw come down, but they don't find anything. But there is something there. Seems Herbert's dad died, and they shared an interest in astronomy, and all the kids all live in a home together. The next morning, they go to the crash site of the meteor, only it's this big capsule thing, and they're able to sneak around to the back of it to investigate. It opens up and a tentacled thing appears, and it shoots out a smoke that seems hypnotic, but then seals back up. But then, the whole thing opens up and a tripod emerges from the top, raising above the crowd, and starts to fire on people with a heat ray, turning them into ash. Then, more comets start to crash down, and the kids narrowly escape, and they encounter a soldier whose entire platoon had been wiped out. They're told not to take cars, so they get on their bikes and make their way to a camp, but that gets attacked as well, and they have to run away again. They end up on a rowboat and meet up with a priest, go to his house, although he's clearly off the deep end. He tries to keep them captive, but is then tentacled as they basically redo the bit from the basement scene of the Spielberg version. They reunite with that soldier and figure out that there may indeed be something in that initial meteor. So they go there only to see what appears to be eggs, and they're feeding humans into it to turn into mist. Augie gets taken away, so the soldier sacrifices himself to rescue him, and after narrowly getting away, the next day they come across a number of alien carcasses. Then they're told, of course, that the Martians died from simple bacteria, and it's just kinda over. There's no date again, so I guess it's real-time 2023, and the ending shows an egg hatching. Finally, in 2024, there was a sequel to War of the Worlds Annihilation with War of the Worlds Extinction. They recap, and this is weird, they basically rewrite the first film, and now it was Earth that invaded the other planet called Emios. So the first film is actually the same, except that we were the invaders. Sculler is back, and his daughter is there as well, attempting to help out refugees from Earth, because the alien refugees on that last film are now human refugees. However, she gets blasted and killed, which makes him sad for like a second or so. But then he's talking about some sort of doomsday device on the planet, and it has some sort of keys that need to be located. It jumps ahead 2 months, and I should point out that they say it's a month between the two films, so it seems like it's picking up right away, so I guess it's also 2021, just like later in the year. There's a military general here, and it's Michael Pare, and I guess he's meant to be an Earth general, and they say that Earth's atmosphere is now poisoned, so that's why they're trying to take over, and they're trying to find the doomsday pieces to destroy Earth. So to be clear, Sculler is an Emiosian, and at the ending of the film, in the first film, he went to Earth to fight us, not another planet, and he's trying to destroy it now. Got it? Because I don't. They activate the first key, which triggers a whole bunch of volcanoes around the world, creating mass disaster. They find the second one, and it creates massive earthquakes. And then after locating the final key, Sculler is shot. But he shoots the general and plugs it in, activating the final disaster, tidal waves. Jill takes pity on Sculler and helps him and convinces him to stop the disasters. So they remove the keys, stopping the tidal waves. But Sculler is killed by his own soldier. And they celebrate by standing in front of a green screen. So there you have it, a whole mess of War of the Worlds movies that don't really have much in the way of continuity. I mean, there's a couple of here that are linked, but even those ones don't seem to be linked that well. So yeah, some oddball ones in here, but there was some fun flicks in here. This was mostly pretty enjoyable. There's nothing in here that was like painful to watch, but some of them were not great. Let me know which of these you've seen. Let me know if you enjoy War of the Worlds in general. Tell me that down below in the comments. I'd like to hear that. Let me know what you thought of this video. Tell me that as well, too. And if you did like it, hit the like button. If you enjoy the channel, subscribe to it. Yeah, do that. Hit the bell so you get notified when new videos come up. And check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines, where you can help support this channel so I can keep on making you videos. And there's going to be another great one coming your way very shortly, so stay tuned. And thanks a lot. Bye-bye.